The wind howled across the Wyoming prairie like a wounded coyote, rattling the loose boards of Clara May Walker's weathered farmhouse. She stood at the kitchen window, watching dust devils dance across the barren fields where her wheat should have been standing tall. Instead, the autumn of 1876 had brought nothing but drought and whispers from town, whispers about the widow who lived alone, too far from decent folk, in a house that might have harbored outlaws. Clara tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear, her calloused hands gripping the worn dish rag. 28 years old and already bearing the weight of solitude like a yoke across her shoulders. It had been 2 years since they'd found Samuel face down in the creek. No marks on him save for the water in his lungs. The sheriff had closed the case quick enough, but the rumors lingered like smoke after a prairie fire. Samuel Walker, they said, had been running gold for the Garrison gang. Some even whispered he'd been silenced by his own. She turned from the window, her boots echoing on the wooden floor. The house felt too large, too empty, filled with shadows that stretched longer each day. The nearest neighbor, old Mrs. Hutchinson, lived 3 miles east, and even she'd stopped coming by after the talk started. Clara had learned to doctor her own animals, mend her own fences, and swallow her pride when the general store clerk counted her coins twice, as if they might be stolen. Outside, her mare, Buttercup, whinnied nervously in the barn. Clara frowned. The horse had been skittish all morning, and the sky bore that peculiar green tinge that promised a storm. She grabbed her father's old Winchester from above the door, a habit Samuel had mocked, but one that had served her well when coyotes came sniffing around the chicken coop. The barn door slammed against its frame as she crossed the yard, her skirts whipping around her legs. The temperature had dropped 10 degrees in as many minutes. She needed to get the animals secured before. A groan, low, guttural, barely human. Clara froze, the rifle coming up instinctively. The sound came again, from beyond the fence line where the prairie grass grew tall and wild. She approached slowly, each step deliberate, the gun steady in her hands despite the tremor in her chest. What she found made her breath catch. A man lay crumpled against the fence post, his dark coat torn and dusty, blood seeping through his shirt. His face was obscured by dirt and what might have been days of stubble, but she could see he was young, maybe 30, 35 at most. A Colt .45 lay inches from his outstretched hand, and his horse was nowhere to be seen. Clara stood there, the rifle trained on his chest, weighing her options. A wounded stranger on her land could mean nothing but trouble. He could be an outlaw, a deserter, a cattle thief. The sensible thing would be to ride to town, fetch the sheriff, let the law handle it. But the storm was coming fast now, the first fat drops of rain striking her face, and something in the man's labored breathing, the way his fingers twitched toward his gun without quite reaching it, stirred something she'd thought buried with Samuel. "Mister!" she called out, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open gray as the storm clouds above and fixed on her with surprising clarity. "Please," he rasped, and the single word held more desperation than any sermon about Christian charity. Clara lowered the rifle slightly. "Who are you? What happened?" He tried to speak again, but only managed a wet cough that brought blood to his lips. His eyes rolled back, and he slumped further into the dirt. The rain began in earnest then, cold and driving. Clara cursed under her breath, words her mother would have washed her mouth for, and made her decision. She couldn't leave him to die in the storm, stranger or not. Setting the rifle aside, she knelt beside him, checking his wounds. The blood seemed to come from a gash along his ribs, deep but not immediately fatal if tended properly. Getting him to the house proved harder than she'd anticipated. The man was tall, lean, but solid with muscle, and dead weight in his unconscious state. Clara had to half drag, half carry him, pausing every few feet to catch her breath and adjust her grip. The rain soaked through her dress, plastering it to her skin, but she pressed on with the same determination that had kept the farm running these 2 lonely years. By the time she managed to get him inside and onto the kitchen table, her arms shook with exhaustion. She lit every lamp she could find, needing the light to work by, and set water to boil on the stove. His coat came off first, revealing a shirt that might once have been white, but was now rust-colored with blood and trail dust. Beneath it, his chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Clara had doctored enough farm injuries to know her way around a wound. She cleaned it carefully, noting the jagged edges that suggested a knife rather than a bullet. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice other scars marking his torso, a puckered bullet wound near his shoulder. Thin white lines that might have been from barbed wire or worse. This was a man who'd lived hard and suffered for it. She stitched the wound with the same neat hand she used for quilting, trying not to think about the intimacy of touching a stranger's skin, of having him laid out half bare on the table where she took her lonely meals. When it was done, she covered him with a blanket and moved him through sheer force of will more than strength to the small bed in what had been Samuel's study. Only then did she allow herself to truly look at him. Cleaned of blood and dirt, his face held a rough handsomeness, angular jaw, straight nose that had been broken at least once, dark hair that fell across his forehead. His hands, she noticed, bore the calluses of a man who worked with horses and guns in equal measure. Clara shook herself. What was she doing? Mooning over an unconscious stranger like some silly girl from the dime novels. She needed to search his belongings, find out who he was and whether bringing him here had signed her own death warrant. His coat pockets held a few coins, a packet of tobacco, a folded piece of paper too water-damaged to read. No identification, no letters, nothing to say who he was or where he'd come from. The gun was well-maintained, but unremarkable, the type carried by any man west of the Mississippi. She was reaching for his boots when his hand shot out, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. Clara's heart leapt to her throat as those gray eyes fixed on her again, clearer now, but still glazed with pain. "No law," he growled, his voice rough as gravel. "Please, no law." "Who are you?" Clara asked again, not pulling away from his grip. "Jesse," he managed. "Jesse Colt. And if you fetch the sheriff, ma'am, you'll be signing both our death warrants." His hand fell away, and he sank back into unconsciousness, leaving Clara standing there with her pulse pounding and 1,000 questions burning on her tongue. Outside, the storm raged on, cutting them off from town, from help, from any chance of changing her mind. She looked down at the stranger, at Jesse Colt. If that was even his real name, and wondered what she'd just invited into her home, the smart thing would be to put him out, storm or no storm. Let him take his chances with whoever was hunting him. Instead, she found herself pulling a chair beside the bed, the Winchester across her lap, and settling into wait. The lamp flame flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls, and Clara May Walker kept her vigil over the stranger who'd stumbled into her solitary life, bringing with him the promise of trouble and something else, something she didn't dare name yet. The wind continued its mournful song across the prairie, and somewhere in the darkness, she thought she heard horses, but it might have been thunder, or her imagination, or the echo of her own foolish heart beating out a rhythm of hope and dread in equal measure. Morning would bring answers, she told herself. Morning would bring clarity and good sense and the strength to do what needed doing. But for now, in the lamplit darkness with rain drumming on the roof, Clara allowed herself this moment of dangerous charity, watching over a stranger whose very presence might unravel the careful existence she'd built from the ashes of her loss. Dawn broke pale and hesitant across the prairie, as if the sun itself was uncertain about illuminating whatever the storm had washed in. Clara woke with a start, her neck stiff from sleeping in the chair, the Winchester still heavy across her lap. For a moment, she'd forgotten, then her eyes fell on the man in the bed, and the previous night rushed back like floodwater through a broken dam. Jesse Colt lay still, but his breathing seemed deeper, more regular. The fever that had taken hold during the night appeared to have broken, leaving his dark hair damp against the pillow. Clara stood slowly, working the kinks from her spine, and approached the bed with the caution of someone approaching a wounded wolf. His eyes opened as her shadow fell across him, those storm-gray eyes that seemed to hold secrets deeper than the old mine shafts dotting the Wyoming hills. "Water," he rasped. Clara fetched a cup from the kitchen, helping him sit up enough to drink. His hand shook as it covered hers on the cup, and she tried not to notice the warmth of his fingers or the way his throat worked as he swallowed. "How long?" he asked when the cup was empty. "Since yesterday evening. You've been out all night." She set the cup aside, maintaining a careful distance. "Now that you're awake, Mr. Colt, I'll be needing some answers." A ghost of a smile touched his cracked lips. "Fair enough, ma'am, though I suspect you might not care for what you hear." "Try me. I've heard plenty in my time." He studied her for a long moment, taking in her plain dress, her work-worn hands, the determination in her hazel eyes. "You're Samuel Walker's widow." It wasn't a question. Clara's spine stiffened. "You knew my husband?" "Knew of him. Word travels fast out here, especially word about—" He paused, seeming to reconsider his words. "About men who die unexpected. If you're suggesting my husband was mixed up in something unlawful—" "I'm suggesting nothing, Mrs. Walker. Just observing that you're a woman alone who took in a bleeding stranger without asking too many questions. That speaks to either uncommon kindness or uncommon desperation." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Perhaps it speaks to common decency, something that seems in short supply these days. This time his smile was fuller, transforming his face from dangerous to something almost boyish. Perhaps it does at that. She busied herself checking his bandages, needing something to do with her hands. The wound looked better in daylight, angry red but beginning to close. As she worked, she was acutely aware of his eyes on her, watching with an intensity that made her fingers fumble with the linen strips. "You've done this before," he observed. "Farm life teaches you to make do. Can't run for a doctor every time something needs stitching." Still, not many would have the stomach for it, or the skill. Clara secured the fresh bandage and stepped back. "You still haven't told me who you are. Jesse Colt tells me nothing except what you want me to call you." He was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his words. "What do you want to know?" "Who cut you who's hunting you? Are they likely to come here looking—" "Yes, probably. And most certainly." He met her alarmed look steadily. "I won't lie to you. Mrs. Walker, you've earned better than that. The men hunting me are professionals bounty hunters out of Cheyenne. They're tracking what they believe to be their biggest score in years. You're wanted. Dead or alive, with emphasis on the dead. Seems I'm worth more that way, less trouble for transport." Clara sank into the chair, the weight of her decision settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. "What did you do? Recently, or are we going back to the beginning?" "Don't get smart with me, Mr. Colt. I've got a rifle and know how to use it." "I don't doubt it." He shifted, wincing at the movement. 3 years ago, I rode with some men out of Texas, started honest enough cattle drives, ranch work. But honest doesn't pay much, and angry young men make poor choices when someone waves gold in their faces. "You were an outlaw." "I was a fool. Thought I was fighting some grand fight against the railroad barons and land grabbers. Turns out I was just another gun for hire, making rich men richer while poor folks suffered for it." His jaw tightened. "Took me too long to see it clear, but when I did, I walked away. Problem is, men like that don't appreciate desertion, especially when you know where they've buried their secrets." Clara absorbed this, her practical mind already calculating risks and possibilities. "So you're running from your old gang?" "From what's left of them, and from the law they've set on my trail with carefully edited stories about my crimes." He looked toward the window where morning light was strengthening. "I should go. Soon as I can sit a horse, I'll be out of your hair. You've done more than enough, and I won't have your kindness repaid with bullets. You can barely sit up, much less sit a horse." The words came out sharper than she intended. "And going out there half-healed is just asking to die slower. Better than bringing death to your door." Clara stood abruptly, moving to the window. The prairie stretched endless and empty, but she knew how deceptive that emptiness could be. "How many are hunting you?" "3, last I counted, led by a man named Marcus Thornton. He's thorough." "I know the name. He brought in the Carver brothers last year. What's left of them, anyway?" "That's him?" She turned back to study Jessie, this stranger who disrupted her carefully ordered isolation. Even wounded and worn, there was something compelling about him, a coiled energy that suggested danger and possibility in equal measure. It had been so long since she'd felt anything beyond the numb routine of survival. "You'll stay until you're healed enough to have a fighting chance," she heard herself say. "But you'll earn your keep? There's work needs doing around here, and I won't harbor a layabout, wanted man or not." His eyebrows rose. "You're offering to hide a fugitive. I'm offering to nurse a wounded man until he's fit to travel. What happens after that is between you and your conscience. And if Thornton comes calling, then I'll tell him the truth that I found a wounded stranger and did my Christian duty. Nothing more, nothing less." Jessie studied her for a long moment. "You're either the bravest woman I've met or the most foolish. Probably both. Rest now. Come evening, if you're feeling up to it. You can help me with the stock. The storm scattered them something fierce." She left him then, needing distance from those penetrating eyes and the questions they raised. In the kitchen, she gripped the edge of the table and tried to steady her breathing. What was she doing? Samuel would have... But no, Samuel was gone, and his choices had led to a creek-bed grave. This was her choice, her risk to take. The morning passed in a blur of chores. Clara fed the chickens, checked on Buttercup and the other horses, surveyed the storm damage to her meager crops. All the while, she was aware of the man in the house, a presence that seemed to charge the very air. When she returned to check on him at midday, she found Jessie had managed to sit up, his back against the headboard. He'd found his shirt blood-stained but wearable and had it half-buttoned. "You should be resting," she scolded. "Hard to rest when there's daylight burning. You mentioned stock that needed tending." "You can barely stand." To prove her wrong, he swung his legs over the side of the bed and pushed himself upright. He swayed for a moment, face paling, but kept his feet. "See right as rain." "Right as a drought. More like, sit down before you tear those stitches." But he was already moving toward the door, one hand braced against the wall. "Where I come from? Mrs. Walker. A man doesn't lie abed while a woman does all the work, especially not a woman who saved his life." Clara wanted to argue, but something in his expression stopped her. Pride. She recognized. The same stiff-necked pride that kept her from accepting charity from the townspeople who whispered behind her back. "Fine," she conceded, "but you'll do as I say. And if those stitches start bleeding, it's back to bed with you." What followed was perhaps the strangest afternoon of Clara's life since Samuel's death. Jessie, despite his wounds, proved surprisingly capable. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of years adapting to pain, and his hands were gentle with the animals, especially the horses. They worked mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet, broken only by necessary communication. When the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the prairie in shades of gold and amber, they found themselves at the well behind the house. Jessie worked the pump while Clara held the bucket, and she found herself stealing glances at him. His shirt had come partially unbuttoned during the work, revealing the lean muscles of his chest and the edge of the bandage. When he caught her looking, she turned away quickly, heat flooding her cheeks. "It's been a long time since anyone looked at me with anything other than fear or greed," he said quietly. Clara kept her eyes on the water bucket. I'm not looking at you any particular way. No. There was gentle amusement in his voice. My mistake, then. She risked a glance up and found him watching her with an expression that made her stomach flutter in ways it hadn't for years. The setting sun caught in his gray eyes, turning them to silver. And for a moment the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them standing by the well. We should get inside, Clara said, her voice not quite steady. Temperature drops quick after sunset. But neither of them moved. Jesse set down the pump handle, taking a step closer. Clara, he said, and it was the first time he'd used her given name. I need you to understand something. The men hunting me, they won't care that you're a woman alone, if they think you've helped me. I know the risks, she interrupted. I'm not some delicate flower that needs protecting. Mr. Colt, I've survived 2 years on my own in a place that would break most men. I can handle whatever comes. I believe you can. That's what worries me. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and coming winter. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its pack. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass and just as dangerous if it shattered. Finally, Jesse stepped back. You're right. We should get inside. That night, Clara insisted Jesse take the bed again while she kept watch. But this time, she positioned her chair where she could see both the window and the door. The Winchester loaded and ready. Jesse protested, but she silenced him with a look that had quelled rowdy ranch hands in better days. As the night deepened, she found herself watching him sleep, studying the planes of his face in the lamplight. Who was Jesse Colt really outlaw? Certainly, killer. Probably. But there was something else there. Something in the way he'd handled her horses, the respect in his voice when he spoke to her. Alone on the prairie, he had murmured just before sleep took him, his eyes finding hers in the dim light. But you burn like fire inside. Clara May, I can see it plain as day. She'd had no answer for that, just as she had no answer for the warmth that bloomed in her chest at his words. The night stretched long and dark ahead, full of danger and possibility in equal measure. And Clara May Walker, widow and survivor, keeper of secrets and tender of wounds, maintained her vigil over the stranger who'd awakened something in her she'd thought buried with her husband, that sweetest fire that threatened to consume all her careful defenses and light her from within. A week passed in strange domesticity, each day bringing small revelations and growing tension. Jesse's wound healed with remarkable speed, and he threw himself into work around the farm with an intensity that spoke of a man unaccustomed to goodness. He mended the chicken coop that had listed sideways since last winter, repaired the barn door that Clara had been meaning to fix for months, and somehow coaxed her temperamental plow horse, Augustus, into accepting a harness without the usual battle. Clara watched it all with growing unease, not at Jesse's presence, which had become strangely comfortable, but at how quickly she'd adapted to having him there. She caught herself setting 2 plates at dinner without thinking, found herself listening for his footsteps on the porch, noticed how the house felt less hollow with another soul moving through its rooms. On the 8th morning, she woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. No postmark, no return address, just her name written in spidery script. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Widow Walker. The letter read, It has come to our attention that you are harboring a dangerous criminal. For your own safety and reputation, you would be wise to turn him over to the proper authorities. Some mistakes cannot be undone, as your late husband learned. Do not follow his path. Clara read it twice, then crumpled it in her fist. Through the kitchen window, she could see Jesse working on the fence line, his movements easy and unguarded. She should tell him, should warn him that their borrowed time was running out. Instead, she threw the letter into the stove and watched it burn. That afternoon, Tom Morrison from town arrived with supplies she'd ordered weeks ago. Tom was a decent sort, one of the few who still treated her with courtesy, though she caught him glancing around nervously as he unloaded sacks of flour and coffee. Everything all right out here, Mrs. Walker, he asked, accepting the cup of water she offered.
Fine as ever. Tom, why do you ask?
He shifted his weight, not quite meeting her eyes. Just, there's been talk in town. Strangers asking questions. Thought you should know, being out here alone and all. Clara kept her expression neutral. What kind of strangers? Bounty hunters, by the look of them. Mean-faced bunch led by that Thornton fellow. They're saying they tracked a wanted man this direction, offering good money for information.
I see.
Well, I haven't seen anyone pass through here. Tom nodded, but his eyes drifted toward the barn where Jesse's hat was visible on a fence post. You'd tell someone if you were in trouble. Wouldn't you, the sheriff? Maybe, or...
I'm perfectly safe. Tom, thank you for your concern.
After he left, Clara found Jesse in the barn, running his hands along Buttercup's flanks. He looked up as she entered, and she saw he already knew. Morrison spotted me. He said it wasn't a question. He saw your hat, maybe nothing more.
Maybe?
Jesse's jaw tightened. I should leave tonight. I've brought enough trouble to your door.
You'll do no such thing.
The vehemence in her own voice surprised her. Tom Morrison's a good man. He won't say anything unless he's sure.
And when Thornton starts waving money around,
then we'll deal with that when it comes. Clara moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes.
Tell me something. Jesse, this past you're running from, is it worth dying for?
He was quiet for a long moment, his hand still on the horse's neck. 3 years ago, I rode with the Brennan gang out of Texas. You might have heard of them. Clara's breath caught. Everyone had heard of the Brennan gang train robbers and killers who'd terrorized the southern railways before disappearing into Mexico. You rode with Cole Brennan?
I did, young and stupid and full of anger at the world.
My father died building those railways, worked to death for pennies while rich men got richer. When Cole offered me a chance to hit back, he shrugged. It seemed like justice at the time.
What changed?
A job went bad in Amarillo. We hit a train we thought was carrying railroad payroll. Turned out to be mostly passengers' families heading west, looking for better lives. His voice went rough. There was a little girl. Couldn't have been more than 6. She got caught in the crossfire when the guards started shooting. Died in her mother's arms while we rode away with our blood money. Clara reached out instinctively, her hand covering his on the horse's neck. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it I chose to be there? Chose to follow Cole. He turned his hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. That night I told him I was done. He laughed, said nobody leaves the Brennan gang except in a pine box. So I proved him wrong. You left. I took something first. Evidence of where Cole hid the money. Records of which lawmen he'd bought. Insurance. I thought, turns out it just painted a bigger target on my back. Why didn't you turn it over to the authorities? Jesse's smile was bitter.
Which ones?
Half the badges in Texas were on Cole's payroll. The other half would have shot me on sight. So I ran north, kept running, tried to disappear. But men like Cole have long memories and longer reaches. Clara understood now the weight he carried, the haunted look that shadowed his eyes even when he smiled. She knew about guilt, about choices that couldn't be undone.
My husband,
she said quietly, was a good man who made bad decisions. He got mixed up with some men who promised easy money running gold shipments, unofficial shipments, if you take my meaning. The Garrison Gang. You knew. I told you, word travels. Samuel Walker was the inside man who helped them hit 3 Army payrolls before he grew a conscience. Clara pulled her hand away. He was trying to get out. Said he had enough saved to start fresh somewhere else. Maybe California. Then one morning I found him in the creek. Garrison doesn't let people retire easy. Neither does Cole Brennan, apparently. She met his eyes steadily. So, here we are. 2 people with ghosts at our backs, pretending we can outrun them. You don't have to be part of this, Clara. Your ghosts are buried. Mine are still hunting. Are they? She pulled out the morning's letter, smoothed it flat, and handed it to him. "This came today." Jesse read it, his expression darkening. "They know I'm here."
"They suspect there's a difference."
Not much of one. He crumpled the letter like she had, then seemed to think better of it and smoothed it out again. "This threat about your husband
is meant to scare me. I don't scare easy."
"No," he said softly.
"You don't."
They stood close in the barn's filtered light, dust motes dancing between them like tiny stars. Jesse reached up, his thumb brushing along her cheekbone with surprising gentleness.
"You're something else. Clara May Walker, in another life."
"We don't get other lives," she whispered.
"Just this one."
"Then I'd best make it count." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met in a kiss that was careful at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. Then Clara's hand came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat race to match her own, and careful flew out the window like a spooked bird. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jesse rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things."
"Everything's already complicated,"
Clara pointed out. "Fair point." A sound from outside made them both freeze horses, moving fast. Jesse was at the barn door in 2 strides, peering out through a crack. "3 riders, coming from the east. Could be anybody." But Clara knew better. Anybody didn't ride that hard toward her isolated farm. "Get to the house," she said. "The root cellar has a false back. Samuel built it for emergencies." "I'm not hiding while you—"
"Yes, you are."
She grabbed the Winchester from where it leaned against the wall.
"Because if they find you here, we're both dead. If it's just me, I can talk my way out of it."
Jesse caught her arm as she passed.
"Clara, go," she said fiercely. "And whatever you hear, you stay hidden."
She waited until he'd slipped out the back of the barn before walking out to meet the riders, rifle casual in her hands. As they drew closer, she recognized the man in the lead from wanted posters and whispered stories. Marcus Thornton sat his horse like a man born to the saddle, all lean muscle and predatory grace. The 2 men flanking him looked equally dangerous. "And Mrs. Walker." Thornton touched his hat brim in a mockery of courtesy. "Fine morning. Mr. Thornton, what brings you to my property?" "Now, that's interesting." His smile was all teeth, no warmth. "You know my name, but I don't recall introducing myself." "Your reputation precedes you, as does your habit of shooting first and asking questions of the corpses." One of the other men chuckled. Thornton silenced him with a look. "I prefer to think of myself as thorough. Speaking of which, we're tracking a dangerous fugitive.
Man named Jesse Colt killed 3 men down in Laramie, shot a sheriff in Colorado. You haven't seen anyone pass through here."
"I see lots of people pass by. None stop to introduce themselves or share their criminal histories. This one might have been wounded. We winged him good few days back." Clara kept her expression carefully neutral. "If I see any wounded fugitives, I'll be sure to notify the proper authorities." "You do that." Thornton swung down from his horse, movements lazy as a big cat. "Mind if we water our horses? Look around a bit. Man on the run might seek shelter without asking permission first." "My property isn't a public accommodation. Mr. Thornton, you'll need more than suspicion to search it." "Oh, I've got more than suspicion." He pulled out a familiar piece of paper Tom Morrison's supply receipt from that morning. "Seems you've been buying double provisions lately, eating hearty for a widow woman alone." Clara's heart hammered, but she kept her voice steady. "Winter's coming. I stock up when I can." Sure. Still, won't hurt to have a look around. For your safety. Understand, dangerous men like Colt might be hiding anywhere." He took a step forward. Clara raised the Winchester. "That's close enough." The other 2 men went for their guns, but Thornton held up a hand. "Now, Mrs. Walker, no need for unpleasantness. We're all law-abiding folks here.
The law says you need a warrant or permission to search private property.
You have neither. The law also says harboring a fugitive is a hanging offense.
Good thing I'm not harboring anyone then.
They stared at each other. The moment, stretching taut, Clara's finger rested on the trigger, not quite applying pressure, but ready. She'd never shot a man, but looking into Thornton's cold eyes, she thought she could if needed. Finally, Thornton stepped back, that predator's smile returning. Have it your way, Mrs. Walker, but we'll be around, watching. And if Jesse Colt shows his face within 50 miles of here, we'll know it. He swung back into the saddle. Be a shame if you got caught in the crossfire. Pretty woman like you deserves better than a bullet meant for someone else.
Is that a threat,
Mr. Thornton?
Just a friendly warning.
You have a good day now. They rode off in a cloud of dust, but Clara stayed where she was, rifle ready, until they disappeared over the rise. Only then did she allow herself to sag against the fence post, hands shaking with delayed reaction. Jesse was beside her before she heard him approach, taking the rifle gently from her trembling hands. You faced down Marcus Thornton with nothing but a Winchester and nerve, he said, wonder in his voice. Don't get too impressed. I might have wet myself a little. He laughed. The sound startled out of him. God, Clara, you're... He shook his head. I've never met anyone like you. Stubborn and foolish. You mean brave and magnificent. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking over her cheekbones. But this clinches it. I leave tonight. They'll be watching now, waiting for me to show myself. Every minute I stay puts you in more danger. Clara covered his hands with hers. Then we'd best not waste the time we have. That afternoon, they worked side by side in tense preparation. Jesse cleaned and oiled his guns while Clara packed provisions, dried beef, hardtack, what medicines she could spare. Neither spoke of the coming separation, but it hung between them like a physical presence. As the sun began its descent, Jesse saddled a horse not Buttercup, but the sturdy bay gelding Clara used for heavy work. I'll send him back when I can, he promised. Keep him, Clara said. Consider it payment for all the work you've done. They stood in the barn's doorway, golden light slanting across their faces. Jesse had shaved and cleaned up, looking more like the dangerous man Thornton described than the wounded stranger she'd taken in. But his eyes were the same gray as storm clouds and just as full of hidden turmoil. Clara, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle for words. These past days, I haven't felt human in so long. You gave me that back. You gave me something too, she admitted. Reminded me I'm more than just a widow waiting to die. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, as if trying to compress a lifetime into a moment. When they broke apart, Clara was crying, tears she hadn't shed for Samuel, tears for all the might-have-beens and never-weres. I'll come back, Jesse said against her hair. When this is over, when it's safe, I'll come back for you. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. They both knew the odds, knew that men like Jesse Colt rarely got happy endings, but the lie was kinder than the truth, and she let him tell it. She watched him ride away until horse and rider were just a speck against the darkening sky. Then she went inside, barred the door, and sat at her kitchen table with the letter Thornton's men had left that morning. Some mistakes cannot be undone. It had warned, but Clara thought maybe that was wrong. Maybe some mistakes were just the first step toward something better, something worth the risk. In the lamplight, alone again in her empty house, she held on to the memory of gray eyes and work-rough hands, of a week that had shown her she still had fire inside. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows like skeleton fingers. Somewhere out there, Jesse Colt rode toward an uncertain fate, and Clara May Walker, no longer just a widow, but a woman who'd chosen danger over safety, love over loneliness, began her own wait in the darkness. holding onto hope as fragile and precious as prairie flowers after a killing frost. 3 days without word. 3 nights of jumping at every sound, of keeping the Winchester loaded by the door, of scanning the horizon for riders who never came. Clara went through the motions of daily life, feeding chickens, mending fences, tending the vegetable garden, but her mind stayed fixed on a man riding hard toward an uncertain fate. On the 4th morning, she woke to hoofbeats. Multiple riders, approaching fast. Clara grabbed the rifle and peered through the curtain, heart hammering. But instead of Thornton's cold efficiency, she saw chaos horses lathered with sweat, men slumped in saddles, the acrid smell of gunpowder carrying on the morning breeze. The lead rider lifted his head, and Clara's breath caught. Jesse, bloodied but alive, barely keeping his seat. Behind him rode 2 men she didn't recognize, one bleeding from a shoulder wound, the other scanning their back trail with nervous eyes. Clara threw open the door, rifle ready. Jesse! He half fell from the saddle into her arms, heavier than she remembered. Clara, didn't mean to bring trouble. Hush. Get inside, all of you. She helped Jesse stumble toward the house while eyeing his companions warily. You're friends of his. The wounded one, a Mexican with kind eyes despite his pain, nodded. Si, Senora. I am Miguel Santos. This is Ben Hawkins, Jesse. He saved our lives. Explanations later, Clara said curtly. Ben, help me get them inside. Can you see to the horses? The young man, barely more than a boy, really nodded and led the exhausted animals toward the barn. Clara guided Jesse to the kitchen table, her hands already cataloging injuries. A graze along his temple, what looked like a knife wound in his thigh, various cuts and bruises painting a map of violence across his body. What happened? She demanded, fetching her medical supplies. Jesse caught her hand, gray eyes focusing with effort. Thornton ambushed us outside Laramie. Had to fight our way out. Us, Miguel answered while Clara cut away Jesse's blood-soaked pants. Jesse came to warn us. We rode together once, before Thornton. He don't care about bounties so much as bodies. Was going to kill us for knowing Jesse. Clara's hand stayed steady as she cleaned wounds, but inside she seethed. So you led them here to my home? No, Jesse gasped as she probed the knife wound. Lost them. 2 days back. Wouldn't come if... Wasn't sure. Ben returned from the barn, hat in hands. Ma'am, I'm real sorry about this. Jesse said you were good people, that you'd help. I said nothing, Jesse interrupted harshly. Leave her out of... Oh, shut up, Clara snapped. You're bleeding on my table. I'm already in it. She turned to Ben. There's food in the pantry. Make yourself useful while I stitch up these idiots. The next hour passed in controlled chaos. Clara worked with grim efficiency, years of frontier doctoring serving her well. Miguel's shoulder wound was clean the bullet had passed through, while Jesse's leg needed careful stitching. Through it all, Jesse watched her with eyes that held too much emotion for the others to see. When she finished, the men looked less like walking corpses and more like merely beaten humans. Clara washed blood from her hands, noting how steady they remained. Now, she said, someone explain to me exactly what mess you've dragged to my door. Miguel and Ben exchanged glances. Jesse struggled to sit up straighter. After I left here, I went to find these 2. We rode together in better days. Figured if Thornton was hunting me, he'd go after anyone who'd known me. I was right. Barely got out of the boarding house alive, Ben added. Jesse showed up just as Thornton's men kicked in the door. But why come here? Clara demanded. You had to know they'd follow eventually. We need the papers, Jesse said quietly. The evidence I took from Cole Brennan. It's the only thing that'll call off the hunt. Clara frowned. You said you carried it with you. I lied. Buried it the night before I came to your door. Insurance. In case. He gestured weakly at his battered state, in case things went bad. And now? Now I make a deal. The papers for our lives. There's enough in there to hang half the lawmen in Texas, plus Cole himself. The Rangers want it bad enough to offer amnesty. If you can stay alive long enough to deliver it, Clara pointed out. Jesse met her eyes. That's where it gets complicated. Before he could elaborate, Ben whistled sharply from the window. Riders coming 6, maybe 7. Clara's blood ran cold. 7 men meant Thornton had gathered reinforcements. The root cellar, she ordered. All of you, now! Clara, Jesse started. Now, she grabbed the rifle, mind racing. Ben, help them. Miguel, can you shoot with that shoulder? Si, senora, if needed. Let's hope it's not go. She watched them disappear through the cellar door, then quickly set about making the kitchen look normal. Bloodied rags went into the stove, medical supplies back in their cupboard. By the time hoofbeats reached the yard, Clara stood on her porch looking every inch the lone widow woman. But it wasn't Thornton. Sheriff William Maddox swung down from his horse, badge glinting in the morning sun. Behind him rode 6 deputies, all armed, all watching her with suspicious eyes. Maddox had been Samuel's friend once, before everything went wrong. Now he looked at her like something he'd scrape off his boot. Mrs. Walker, he said without preamble. We've had reports of gunfire from this direction, strangers seen riding hard toward your property. I haven't heard any gunfire. Sheriff, as for strangers, she shrugged. Men ride past here all the time. Mind if we look around? It wasn't really a question. Clara stepped aside. I assume you have a warrant this time? Don't need one when pursuing fugitives in the act of flight. Maddox gestured to his men. Search the barn, the outbuildings, check that root cellar. Clara's heart stopped, but she kept her expression neutral. The false back Samuel had built was good, but would it fool a thorough search? Minutes crawled by. Deputies tracked mud through her clean house, poked through her belongings with casual disregard. One emerged from the cellar shaking his head. Nothing down there but preserves and potatoes. Maddox studied her with flat cop eyes. You're sure you haven't seen Jesse Colt? I'm sure I don't know every drifter by name who passes through Wyoming. He's more than a drifter. Mrs. Walker, he's a killer. Shot 2 of Thornton's men day before yesterday. Left them to die slow. His voice hardened. Man like that wouldn't think twice about hurting a woman alone. Clara thought of Jesse's gentle hands with the horses, the pain in his eyes when he spoke of the little girl in Amarillo. I'll keep that in mind. Maddox stepped closer, voice dropping. I knew Samuel. Clara. Knew him before he got mixed up with bad men. Don't follow his path. Samuel's path led to a creek grave. Clara replied evenly. I make my own way. See that you do. He turned to go, then paused. Thornton's outfit is camped 10 miles north. They're watching the roads, waiting. If Colt is stupid enough to show himself. He shrugged. Well, at least the territory will be rid of another mad dog. They left in a cloud of dust and unspoken threats. Clara waited a full 10 minutes before opening the cellar door. Jesse emerged first, face grim. 2 of Thornton's men are dead. They gave us no choice, he said quietly. It was them or us. Clara absorbed this, another weight on the scales. The sheriff's right about one thing. You can't stay here. Thornton's watching the roads, and now Maddox is suspicious. It's only a matter of time. We'll leave tonight, Jesse decided. Head north through the canyons. Circle back for the papers. In your condition, Jesse, you can barely walk. I'll manage. No, Clara said firmly. You'll get yourself killed, and these boys with you. She looked at Miguel and Ben, saw the exhaustion written plain on their faces. There's another way. Jesse's eyes narrowed. Clara, whatever you're thinking,
I know these lands better than anyone. Every deer path, every hidden spring.
She met his gaze steadily.
I'll get your papers. You three rest, heal. When I return, we'll figure out the next move.
Absolutely not. It's not your decision. Clara moved to her husband's old desk, pulling out a yellowed map.
Where did you bury them?
Jesse's jaw worked. Miguel cleared his throat.
Senora, perhaps.
Perhaps nothing. I'm the only one here not wanted by the law. I can move freely. She looked at Jesse.
Unless you'd prefer to wait here like sitting ducks until Thornton gets impatient.
A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Jesse limped to the map, marking a spot with his finger. Old lightning-struck cottonwood, 2 miles north of Settlers Creek, buried at the base, northern side.
I know the place.
Clara folded the map.
I'll leave at dusk. Be back before dawn?
I'm coming with you, Jesse said flatly. You're staying here and not bleeding to death. That's final. They glared at each other, neither backing down. Ben shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should...
Yes,
Clara said without breaking eye contact with Jesse.
Ben, take Miguel to the spare room. He needs rest. There's food in the pantry. Help yourself.
The 2 men retreated gratefully. Alone with Jesse. Clara felt the air charge between them like the moment before lightning strikes. You can't do this, Jesse said, voice rough. I won't let you risk.
Clara kissed him, cutting off his words.
When she pulled back, his eyes had gone dark.
You,
she said softly.
Don't let me do anything. I choose this. I choose you, even knowing what you are, what you've done.
Clara. His hand came up to cup her cheek. You're the only clean thing I've touched in years. I can't be the reason you get hurt. Then don't be. Trust me. Let me help save the man She stopped, the word too large for the moment.
But Jesse heard it anyway.
Say it, he whispered. When you come back, Clara promised. When this is over and we're both still breathing, then I'll say it. She left him there, going to prepare for the night ride. As she packed supplies, water, jerky, ammunition, she felt Jesse watching from the doorway. That first night, he said suddenly, when you found me, you could have left me to die. Should have. Probably. Why didn't you? Clara considered the question. Because I was tired of being alone, tired of being afraid. When I saw you lying there, I thought, maybe here's someone who understands what it's like to be hunted by your own choices. And now, she turned to face him fully.
Now I know I was right. We're both carrying ghosts. Jesse, but maybe together we're strong enough to face them down.
He crossed to her in 2 painful strides, kissing her with desperate intensity. You come back to me, Clara May Walker. You hear no matter what happens. You come back.
I will,
she promised against his lips.
Keep them safe while I'm gone. And Jesse, try not to bleed on any more of my furniture.
His laugh followed her out into the gathering dusk. Clara saddled Buttercup, her most reliable mount, and checked the rifle one more time, somewhere out there. Thornton's men watched and waited. Behind her, 3 wounded men counted on her courage. As she rode out into the darkening prairie, Clara thought about the strange turns that had brought her here. A widow nursing outlaws, riding into danger for a man she'd known barely 2 weeks. Her mother would have been scandalized. Samuel would have been horrified. But Clara May Walker was done living by the expectations of the dead. The living needed her now, one in particular, with storm-gray eyes and gentle hands, who'd awakened a fire in her she'd thought long extinguished. The stars came out one by one, cold and distant. Clara rode on through the darkness, carrying hope like a candle flame, knowing that somewhere behind her, Jesse Colt waited and worried and maybe, just maybe, loved her as fiercely as she'd come to love him. The night stretched ahead, full of danger and possibility. But Clara had made her choice.
thrown her lot in with desperate men and impossible odds. Now all that remained was to see it through, to retrieve the papers that might buy them freedom, and to return to the man who'd shown her that even the coldest prairie nights could burn with the sweetest fire. Clara returned just before dawn, the leather satchel heavy against her hip, Buttercup's breath misting in the cold morning air. She'd ridden hard through the night, taking game trails and creek beds to avoid detection. The papers Jessie had buried were now safely tucked inside her coat, enough evidence to destroy corrupt lawmen from Texas to Colorado. The house stood quiet in the pre-dawn darkness. Too quiet. Clara's instincts prickled as she dismounted, hand moving to the rifle. The front door stood slightly ajar, something she'd never allow. "Jessie," she called softly. Movement from the shadows. Jessie emerged, relief flooding his face. "Clara, thank God!" He pulled her into his arms, holding tight despite his injuries. "We had visitors, Thornton's scouts, sniffing around. Ben led them off on a false trail. But they'll be back." Clara pulled away to study his face. "How long do we have?" "Hours, maybe less." His gray eyes searched hers. "Did you find them?" She patted the satchel. "Every last page, enough to hang half of Texas, just like you said." Inside, Miguel sat cleaning his pistol with his good arm while Ben paced like a caged wolf. The young man looked up as they entered. "Mrs. Walker, you made it back safe." "Safe is relative. Mr. Hawkins." Clara set the satchel on the table. "Jessie tells me we're expecting company." "See," Miguel confirmed. "They know we're here. It's just a matter of when they come in force." Clara looked between the three men wounded, exhausted, but determined. "Then we need to be gone before that happens. Jessie, can you ride?" "I can do whatever needs doing." "That's not what I asked." He grimaced. "The leg's stiff, but I'll manage. Question is, where do we go? Thornton's got the roads watched, and the Rangers won't meet us until—" A shout from outside cut him off. Clara moved to the window, peering through the curtains. Her heart sank. "Too late. They're here." 7 riders approached from the east. Thornton's distinctive black duster visible even in the dim light. But worse. From the north came Sheriff Maddox with another group of deputies. They'd been surrounded while they talked. "2 directions," Ben breathed. "They're boxing us in." Jessie checked his weapons with practiced efficiency. "Miguel, can you shoot?" "Better than I can pray, amigo." "Clara, the cellar is the first place they'll look." Clara's mind raced. "And running's not an option, not with your injuries." She made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks ago. "We make our stand here." Jessie caught her arm. "Clara, no, this isn't your fight." "It became my fight the moment I pulled you from that fence." She met his eyes steadily. "I won't lose you now." "Not when we're so close." Through the window, they watched Thornton and Maddox meet in the yard, their men spreading out to encircle the house. Clara counted at least 15 guns. "Mrs. Walker." Thornton's voice carried clearly. "We know they're in there. Send them out, and we'll overlook your, misguided charity." Clara looked at Jessie, saw the same determination reflected in his eyes. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. She moved to the door, calling out, "And if I refuse—" "Then you're harboring fugitives, ma'am. That makes you fair game," Sheriff Maddox added. "Clara, please, don't make this harder than necessary. You're not like them." "You're right," Clara called back. "I'm not like them. I'm worse. I'm a woman with nothing left to lose and 3 men under my protection." She cocked the Winchester audibly. "First man through that door gets a bellyful of lead." Silence stretched taut. Then Thornton laughed, cold and mirthless. "Brave words. Let's see if you mean them. Boys." The morning exploded into chaos. Windows shattered as gunfire erupted from all sides. Clara dropped below the sill, glass raining down. Jesse dragged her behind the overturned kitchen table as bullets chewed through the walls. "So much for talking," Ben shouted, returning fire through a broken window. Miguel had taken position near the back door, his pistol barking steadily despite his wounded shoulder. Jesse fired controlled shots from beside Clara, making every bullet count. "How much ammunition?" Clara asked, reloading. "Not enough," Jesse replied grimly. "Not for a siege." The house shook under the onslaught. Plaster dust filled the air, mixing with gun smoke. Clara's mother's china crashed from shelves, shattering like her old life breaking apart. A lull in the firing. Thornton's voice again. "Last chance. Colt, you and your friends come out. I might let the woman live." Jesse's jaw tightened. He looked at Clara, something desperate in his eyes. "He's right. If I surrender, then you're dead and I'm still an accomplice." Clara gripped his hand. "We finish this together." Before he could argue, she noticed movement near the barn. 2 of Thornton's men trying to flank them. Without thinking, Clara swung the rifle around and fired. One man spun and fell. The other dove for cover. "Did you just—" Ben stared at her. "I protected what's mine," Clara said evenly, though her hands trembled. She'd never shot a man before. Never thought she could. But for Jesse, for this chance at something beyond mere survival, she'd do worse. The battle resumed with renewed fury. They were holding their own, but ammunition ran low. Miguel took a graze across his temple. Ben's shooting hand bled from flying splinters. Jesse favored his wounded leg more with each movement. Then Clara heard it crackling, and the smell of smoke that wasn't from gunpowder. "Fire!" she shouted. "They've set fire to the house." Orange flames licked at the kitchen wall where burning brands had been thrown. The old wood caught quickly, smoke billowing through the room. "Out the back," Jesse commanded. "Move." They stumbled through thickening smoke, coughing, eyes streaming. The back door led to a killing field, open ground to the barn. No cover, but staying meant burning alive. Jesse pulled Clara close. "Listen to me. When we go out, you run for the barn. Don't stop. Don't look back." "Jesse, promise me." She saw in his eyes what he planned to draw their fire. "Give the others a chance. Only if you promise to be right behind me." He kissed her hard, fierce. "Oh, you took in a stranger, Clara May, and discovered the sweetest fire that lit you from within. Remember that. Remember us." "Jesse, no." He was already moving, bursting through the door with guns blazing. "Come on, you bastards, I'm the one you want." The yard erupted. Jesse dove and rolled, drawing fire as Miguel and Ben broke for the barn. Clara tried to follow, but something slammed into her shoulder, spinning her around. She hit the ground hard, the Winchester flying from her hands. Pain bloomed hot and wet. Through blurring vision, she saw Jesse turn back, his face a mask of anguish. "Clara." "Go!" she gasped, but he was already racing toward her, heedless of the bullets cutting the air around him. He slid to his knees beside her, gathering her against him. "No, no, no! Clara, stay with me!" "The papers," she managed. "In the satchel. Get them to—" "I don't give a damn about the papers." His hands pressed against her shoulder, trying to stem the bleeding. "Hold on, just hold on." The gunfire had stopped. Clara became aware of men surrounding them, weapons trained. Thornton stood over them, satisfaction on his weathered face. "Touching," he drawled. The outlaw and his woman, almost ashamed to end it. But before he could raise his gun, new shouts arose. Riders poured into the yard, not more bounty hunters, but men in the distinctive gray dusters of Texas Rangers. At their head rode a man Clara recognized from newspaper sketches, Captain Augustus McCrae himself, legendary lawman. "Stand down," McCrae's voice cracked like a whip. "Thornton, lower your weapon." Rangers got no jurisdiction here, Thornton snarled. We do when we're pursuing federal matters. McCrae dismounted, hand on his pistol. Jesse Colt's under our protection, pending his testimony against the Brennan gang. Since when? Since about 10 minutes ago, when we got word he had the evidence we've been seeking. McCrae's eyes found Jesse. That true? Son, you got the papers. Jesse's arms tightened around Clara. Help her first, then we talk. McCrae studied them, the burning house, the wounded woman, the desperate man holding her. Something shifted in his weathered face. Hawkins, get the doctor. Move! One of the rangers spurred his horse back toward town. McCrae turned to Thornton. You're done here. Take your men and go. This ain't over, Thornton growled. That bounty is canceled. Colt's got amnesty, pending cooperation. McCrae's hand moved meaningfully toward his gun. Unless you want to argue with the state of Texas. Thornton's face twisted with rage, but he gestured sharply to his men. They mounted up, throwing dark looks at Jesse and Clara as they rode away. Sheriff Maddox lingered, looking uncomfortable. Captain, the woman aided fugitives, shot one of Thornton's men, in defense of her home, which was being unlawfully attacked. McCrae's tone brooked no argument. I see a widow who defended herself against marauders, nothing more. Maddox opened his mouth, then shut it. He touched his hat brim to Clara, something like respect in his eyes, and led his deputies away. Clara's vision swam. The pain in her shoulder had gone numb, which seemed worse somehow. She heard Jesse calling her name, felt his tears on her face, but everything seemed very far away. Stay with me, he whispered. Clara, please, I love you. Do you hear me? I love you. Come back to me. She wanted to answer, wanted to tell him she loved him too, but darkness rushed up like black water, and she knew nothing more. Asterisk. Clara woke to lamplight and the smell of carbolic. Her shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat, but the pain meant she was alive. She turned her head carefully, finding Jesse asleep in a chair beside the bed, his hand covering hers. Jesse! Her voice came out a croak. His eyes flew open, relief flooding his features. Clara, thank God. He leaned forward, pressing her hand to his lips. You've been out for 2 days. I thought... His voice broke. Takes more than one bullet to kill a walker. She managed. The papers. Delivered to Captain McCrae. It's over. Clara, the Rangers have what they need. Amnesty for all of us. Clean slates. His thumb stroked over her knuckles. We're free. Free, she repeated, tasting the word. What about the house? His face fell. Gone. Burned to the foundation. I'm sorry. Clara, your home was just walls and wood. She squeezed his hand weakly. Home is... She met his eyes. Home is where you are. Jesse made a sound between a laugh and a sob. God, woman, even half dead, you undo me. He leaned down, kissing her gently. I love you, Clara May Walker. I should have said it sooner. Should have... Shh! She lifted her good hand to touch his face. You're saying it now. That's what matters. Marry me, he said suddenly. I know I'm no prize former outlaw, currently unemployed, recently homeless, but I swear I'll spend every day making you happy, keeping you safe. We could go to California, start fresh, or anywhere you want. Just marry me. Clara studied his face, the hope and fear warring in his gray eyes, the vulnerability of this dangerous man laying his heart bare. Jesse Colt, she said softly, you rode into my life like a storm, turned everything upside down, got me shot, and burned down my house. His face started to fall. And, she continued, you also brought me back to life, showed me I had fire inside I'd forgotten existed. She smiled through tears. Yes, I'll marry you, though we might need to work on your courtship technique." He kissed her then, careful of her injuries but full of promise. When they broke apart, both were crying and laughing in equal measure. "California sounds nice," Clara murmured. "Somewhere we can build something new, without ghosts." "No ghosts," Jesse agreed. "Just us and whatever future we make." Through the window, Clara could see the sun rising over the Wyoming plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere out there lay the ashes of her old life, the graves of who they'd been. But here, in this moment, lay the seeds of something new, a love forged in fire and tested by lead, strong enough to build a life on. "Jesse," she said softly. "Yeah." "That night, when you were fevered, you said I burned like fire inside." She met his eyes. "You were right. I just needed someone to help me remember it." "And you," he said, voice rough with emotion, "took in a stranger and discovered the sweetest fire that lit you from within. Both of us, I think, lighting each other up." Clara thought about that two lonely souls on the prairie, finding in each other the spark that brought them back to life. It seemed fitting. Somehow, a love story written in gunsmoke and defiance, sealed with blood and tears, but no less true for its violence. "Miguel and Ben?" she asked. "Safe, healing. Ben's talking about heading back east, maybe studying law. Figures the frontier needs more lawyers, fewer gunmen." Jesse smiled. "Miguel's thinking of staying in Wyoming, starting a horse ranch. Asked if we'd write. Let him know how California treats us." "I'd like that," Clara said, "staying connected to friends. Friends who'd bled for them, fought beside them. Family of choice rather than blood." Another gift this strange, violent adventure had brought. A knock at the door interrupted them. Captain McCrae entered, hat in hand. "Mrs. Walker, good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been shot," Clara said dryly. And McCrae chuckled. "Fair enough. I wanted to thank you personally. Those papers your man provided will clean up corruption from here to the Rio Grande. You did a brave thing, both of you." "Just trying to survive, Captain." "Sometimes that's the bravest thing of all." He set a leather pouch on the bedside table. "Rewarded money for information leading to the Brennan gang's capture. Should be enough to get you started wherever you're heading." Clara looked at Jesse, saw her own surprise mirrored there. "We can't—" "Oh, you can and you will," McCrae said firmly. "Consider it the state of Texas saying thank you, and maybe sorry for all the trouble." He touched his hat brim. "You folks take care. World needs more people willing to stand up for what's right, even when it costs them." After he left, Clara, Trevor, and Jesse sat in comfortable silence, hands entwined, watching the morning light grow stronger. The future stretched before them, uncertain but no longer hopeless. They'd found each other across violence and loss, built something worth fighting for from the ashes of their pasts. "No more looking back," Jesse said quietly. "From here on, we face forward, together." "Together," Clara agreed. And in that simple word lay all the promise they needed two hearts that had burned alone in the darkness, now joined in a flame that would light their way through whatever came next. The prairie had brought them together, tested them in fire, and forged them into something stronger than either had been alone. Clara May Walker, widow no more, closed her eyes and smiled, feeling Jesse's pulse beat steady under her fingers. They'd discovered the sweetest fire indeed, the kind that didn't destroy but refined, burning away the dross to reveal the gold beneath. Their story was just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since the morning Clara opened her eyes to find herself still among the living. Her shoulder had healed enough for travel, though it still ached when storms rolled across the prairie. Jesse had spent those weeks in a state of perpetual vigilance, jumping at every sound, checking and rechecking their preparations for the journey to California. But California would have to wait. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a rider who didn't stay long enough to water his horse. Jesse read it twice, his face darkening with each word. "What is it?" Clara asked from where she sat mending one of his shirts. "Cole Brennan," Jesse said grimly. "He's broken out of federal custody, killed 2 marshals in El Paso?" He looked up, meeting her worried gaze. "And according to Captain McCrae's sources, he's heading north, looking for me." Clara set down her sewing. "The papers are already with the Rangers. What could he want?" "Revenge." Jesse moved to the window, scanning the horizon out of habit. "I betrayed the gang, testified against them. In Cole's world, that's a death sentence." He turned back to her. "We need to leave. Tonight." "No." The word hung between them. Jesse's eyebrows rose. "Clara, no more running." She stood carefully, favoring her injured side. "We've spent weeks preparing to leave, saying goodbyes, making peace with this place. If Cole Brennan wants to find you, he will, whether we're here or in California. That's exactly why we should face him." Clara moved to Jesse, placing her hands on his chest. "End this properly, or we'll spend our whole lives looking over our shoulders." Jesse covered her hands with his. "You were shot 2 weeks ago. You're in no condition for another fight." "Then it's good I have you to protect me," she smiled, though her heart raced. "Besides, this time we know he's coming. We can prepare, choose the ground. That's better odds than being ambushed on the trail." Jesse studied her face, seeing the determination there. "You're going to be stubborn about this, aren't you?" "I learned from the best. Despite everything," he smiled. "God help me. I love you. Clara May." "Good. Then trust me. We make our stand here, where we have friends, where we know the land." She rose on her toes to kiss him. "Where our story started." They spent the next days preparing. Miguel and Ben, who'd delayed their own departures to see them off, insisted on staying. "You stood with us," Miguel said simply. "We stand with you." Word spread through the territory as it always did, carried by drifters and traders, whispered in saloons and general stores. Cole Brennan was coming, and the showdown promised to be legendary. Some folks packed up and left town. Others cleaned their guns and chose sides. Sheriff Maddox paid them a visit 3 days after the letter arrived. "I can't officially help you," he said, hat in his hands. "But I also can't stop private citizens from defending themselves against outlaws." "Meaning?" Jesse asked. "Meaning if Cole Brennan and his boys happen to meet with misfortune while terrorizing innocent folks, well," Maddox shrugged. "Sometimes justice finds its own way." Even Tom Morrison from the general store stopped by, bringing ammunition and supplies. "Figure I owe you," he said to Clara, not quite meeting her eyes. "For suspecting wrong about you and your husband, Samuel was a good man who lost his way. You're a good woman who found hers." The preparations reminded Clara of the old days, when communities would circle their wagons against Indian raids or bandits. Except now, the wagons were circling around her and Jesse, protecting a love that had grown from violence but bloomed into something worth fighting for. On the 5th night, as they sat cleaning weapons in the small cabin they'd rented at the edge of town, Jesse suddenly set down his pistol. "Marry me now," he said. Clara looked up from the rifle she was oiling. "What?" "I mean it. Tomorrow. Before whatever happens." He moved to kneel beside her chair. "I don't want to face Cole without you being my wife. If something happens to me—" "Nothing's going to happen to you," Clara said firmly. "But if it does, I want you protected. Legal widow's rights. My name if you want it." His hands found hers. "And selfishly, I want one perfect day with you as my wife before we face the devil." Clara felt tears sting her eyes. "Jesse Colt, are you proposing to me again?" "I'll propose to you every day for the rest of our lives, if you'll let me." His thumb traced circles on her palm. What do you say, Clara May? Will you marry a reformed outlaw before he faces his past one last time?"
"Yes,"
she whispered. "Always yes." The next morning dawned clear and cold. They stood before the circuit judge in his cramped office, Miguel and Ben serving as witnesses. Clara wore her best dress, a deep blue that brought out her eyes, while Jesse had managed to find a proper suit that almost hid the gun belted at his hip. "Do you, Jesse Colt, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Judge Franklin intoned, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I do," Jesse said, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. "And do you, Clara May Walker, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you man and wife." The judge smiled. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Colt." The kiss was tender, full of promise and shadowed by the knowledge of what was coming. When they parted, Clara saw tears in Jesse's eyes. "No crying on our wedding day," she murmured. "Happy tears," he assured her. "The happiest." They had a small celebration at the boarding house cake that Ben had somehow procured, whiskey that Miguel produced with a flourish, and stories that grew more elaborate with each telling. For a few hours, they could pretend they were just newlyweds starting their life together, not fighters preparing for a final confrontation. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the dusty streets, a rider appeared on the horizon, then another and another. "They're here," Ben said quietly from the window. Cole Brennan rode at the head of 8 men, all armed, all bearing the hard look of killers. Cole himself hadn't changed much in 3 years, still lean as a whip, still wearing those cold snake eyes that had haunted Jesse's dreams. He stopped in the middle of the main street, standing in his stirrups. "Jesse Colt," his voice carried clear in the evening air. "Come out and face justice. You backstabbing son of a—" "That's far enough. Cole." Jesse called from the doorway. He stepped out, Clara beside him despite his attempts to keep her inside. "This is between you and me. Let the town be." Cole's laugh was ugly. "The town, you think I care about these sheep?" His eyes found Clara. "Though I see you've found yourself a woman. Pretty thing. Be a shame if she ended up like the last person who stood beside you." "Touch her and I'll—" "You'll what?" Cole dismounted, his men spreading out behind him. "You already betrayed everything we stood for, sold us out for amnesty and a clean slate. Did you really think I'd let that stand?" "What we stood for." Jesse stepped forward, Clara matching him step for step. "We stood for nothing. Cole, we were thieves and murderers dressed up in fancy words about justice. We were brothers." Cole's face twisted. "I pulled you out of that burning ranch, gave you purpose, taught you everything. You taught me how to kill, how to take what wasn't mine, how to justify evil with pretty speeches about fighting oppression." Jesse's hand hovered near his gun. "That little girl in Amarillo taught me the truth. Always back to that brat." Cole sneered. "One casualty in a war." "She had a name," Clara said suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Margaret Ann Foster, 6 years old, traveling with her family to Oregon to start a new life." Cole's eyes snapped to her. "How would you know?" "Because I made it my business to know," Clara continued, stepping forward. "Every person you've hurt, every life you've destroyed. My husband might carry guilt for his part, but you feel nothing." "Your husband," Cole's smile turned predatory. "So the traitor found love. How touching. Tell me, Mrs. Colt, does he cry out their names in his sleep? All the people he killed riding with me?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "He carries his guilt like a man. You carry nothing but emptiness." "Enough talk," one of Cole's men growled. "We came here to kill a traitor, not listen to speeches." But Cole held up a hand, still studying Clara. "You've got spine, lady. I'll give you that. Here's my offer one time only. Walk away now, and you live, Stay, and you die beside him. Clara's response was to draw the pistol from her skirt pocket, a gift from Jesse on their wedding day. I've already been shot once for this man. I'd take a dozen more before I'd abandon him to the likes of you. Clara, Jesse warned. No, she said firmly. We face this together. Remember. Cole looked between them, something flickering in his cold eyes. Love, he spat. The greatest weakness of all. Very well, if you want to die together. The street erupted. But this time, Jesse and Clara weren't alone. Windows flew open as townspeople opened fire on Cole's gang. Miguel and Ben emerged from cover, guns blazing. Even Sheriff Maddox appeared on a rooftop, his rifle speaking with authority. Cole's men, expecting an easy kill, found themselves in a crossfire. 2 fell immediately. Others dove for cover, returning fire wildly. Jesse pushed Clara behind a water trough as bullets filled the air. So much for just you and me, he shouted over the gunfire. You didn't really think I'd let you face him alone, Clara replied, firing over the rim. We're married now. Your fights are my fights. Through the chaos, Jesse saw Cole moving with deadly purpose, using his men's deaths as cover to advance. Their eyes met across the battlefield, mentor and student, betrayer and betrayed. Go, Clara said, understanding immediately. End this. Jesse kissed her hard. I love you. I know. Now go show him what you've learned about being a better man. Jesse rolled from cover, moving to meet Cole in the center of the street. Around them, the battle raged. But the 2 men might as well have been alone. Just you and me now, boy, Cole said, his hand hovering over his gun, the way it should have been from the start. It didn't have to end this way, Jesse said. You could have taken the deal, testified, found redemption. Redemption? Cole laughed bitterly. That's your woman talking. There's no redemption for men like us. Jesse, just the gun in the grave. Maybe for you. They drew simultaneously. 2 shots cracked as one. Jesse felt the wind of Cole's bullet pass his cheek. His own shot took Cole's center mass, spinning him around. But Cole Brennan was tough as leather. He stayed on his feet, trying to raise his gun again. Jesse walked forward, firing again. Cole dropped to one knee. You always were the best I trained. Cole gasped, blood running from his mouth. Too good to waste on conscience. That's where you're wrong, Jesse said quietly. Conscience made me better. Love made me whole. Cole's eyes found Clara, who had emerged from cover. Pretty words, he whispered, then louder, with his last breath. See how they comfort you in the dark. He fell forward, still. The gunfire was dying down. Of Cole's 8 men, 6 were down. The other 2 had thrown away their weapons, hands raised in surrender. The town had stood together and won. Jesse dropped his gun, suddenly exhausted. Clara was there immediately, wrapping her arms around him as he shook with delayed reaction. It's over, she whispered. It's finally over. Is it? Jesse pulled back to look at her. Can we really just move on after all this death? We can try. Clara touched his face gently. We can take all this pain and violence and build something better from it. That's what redemption really is, not erasing the past, but using it to create a better future. Around them, townspeople emerged, some wounded but all alive. They looked at Jesse and Clara with something approaching respect. They'd proven themselves, paid for their place in blood and courage. Sheriff Maddox approached, looking down at Cole's body. Hell of a thing, he said quietly. Man like that, dying for pride and old anger. He died as he lived, Jesse said, believing violence was the only truth. And you, Maddox studied him. What do you believe? Jesse looked at Clara, his wife, his salvation, his partner in all things. I believe in second chances,
in the power of love to transform even the lowest sinner. He managed a tired smile. And I believe my wife and I have a journey to California to finally begin. After we help clean up this mess, Clara added practically, and say proper goodbyes, and make sure Miguel and Ben are settled. Always the practical one, Jessie murmured, pulling her close. Someone has to be. Lord knows you'd forget your own head if it wasn't attached. As the sun set over the bloody street, casting everything in shades of red and gold, Jessie and Clara Colt stood together, survivors of their own violent fairy tale. They'd found each other across impossible odds, fought for their love against all corners, and emerged scarred but unbroken. Tomorrow would bring new challenges the journey west, building a life free from the shadows of their past, learning to be husband and wife without gunfire as background music. But tonight, they were simply two people who had chosen each other over everything else, who had discovered that the sweetest fire wasn't the one that consumed, but the one that refined and purified. No more looking back, Clara said, echoing Jessie's words from the hospital. Only forward, he agreed. Together, they walked away from Cole Brennan's cooling corpse, from the violence and pain that had brought them together, toward a future written in hope rather than lead. Behind them, the town began the work of cleaning up and moving on. Ahead lay California and all its golden promises. But in that moment, Jessie and Clara had everything they needed each other, their love tested in the crucible of violence and found stronger than steel, and the knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it as one. The prairie wind sang through the empty streets, carrying away the gun smoke and the echoes of battle, and somewhere in that wind, if you listened closely, you might hear the whisper of redemption not in grand gestures or famous last stands, but in the simple act of two damaged people choosing to heal each other, one day at a time. Their real story, the story of building rather than destroying, of loving rather than hating, was just beginning. The victory over Cole Brennan should have been the end. Jessie and Clara had packed their wagon, said their farewells, and set their faces toward California. But fate, it seemed, had one more card to play. The message came on a Sunday evening. 3 days before their planned departure, a young Apache scout named Geronimo Jr., son of the famous chief, rode into town with news that changed everything. "Cain Tabor," he said simply, accepting water from Clara. "He rides with 20 men, says the bounty on Jessie Colt stands, government paper or no government paper." Jessie's face went hard. Cain Tabor, the man who'd killed his father years ago, the catalyst that had driven him to Cole Brennan's gang in the first place. Where? 2 days north, they hit the settlement at Willow Creek, looking for information. The scout's eyes were grave. They hurt people, Mrs. Colt, made examples. Clara felt cold despite the warm evening. Women, children, all who wouldn't talk. Geronimo Jr. looked between them. "Tabor says he'll keep burning settlements until Jessie Colt comes to face him. Says it's personal." "It always was," Jessie said quietly. He looked at Clara, saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. They couldn't run, not with innocent blood being spilled in their name. That night, they held a war council in the remains of Clara's old farmhouse. Miguel and Ben had returned upon hearing the news, joined by Sheriff Maddox and several townsmen who'd stood with them against Cole. 20 men is an army, Maddox said bluntly. Cole had 8 and nearly took us apart. "But we surprised Cole," Jessie pointed out. "This time we know they're coming. We can prepare better." "Prepare how?" Tom Morrison asked. He'd become an unlikely ally since the fight with Cole. "Tabor's no ordinary bounty hunter. Man's got a reputation for cruelty that makes Thornton look like a Sunday school teacher." Clara spread out a map on the makeshift table. "Then we don't fight him here. We choose the ground." Her finger traced the landscape. The old Miller Ranch, 15 miles north. Abandoned now, but the buildings are still solid. "That's toward Willow Creek." Ben observed, "Toward Tabor,"
Exactly. Clara looked up. We send word we're coming. Draw him to ground of our choosing. It's suicide. Morrison protested. Riding out to meet them? It's strategy. Jesse interrupted. Clara's right. The Miller place has good sight lines, defensible positions, and... He hesitated, then continued. It keeps the fight away from innocent people. Sheriff Maddox studied the map. I can't officially sanction this, but if a group of concerned citizens happens to ride north to protect settlers from raiders, he shrugged. Well, that's just civic duty. They spent the next day preparing. Word spread through town, and volunteers trickled in. Not many most folks had families to think of, but enough. 12 men and 2 women who could shoot straight and had their own reasons for standing against men like Tabor. Among them was a surprise Sarah Oakley, the banker's daughter who'd barely spoken to Clara since Samuel's death. Mrs. Colt, she said stiffly. I owe you an apology. I believed the worst about you, about your husband. I was wrong. She hefted a rifle with surprising competence. My father taught me to shoot. Figure it's time I put it to use. As they prepared to ride out, Jesse pulled Clara aside. You don't have to do this. You could wait here. Jesse Colt, Clara said firmly. If you suggest one more time that I stay behind while you ride into danger, I'll shoot you myself and save Tabor the trouble. Despite everything, he smiled. Just checking. Wouldn't want you to think I'm getting soft. Never that. She kissed him gently. We started this journey together. We'll finish it the same way. They rode out at dawn 17 souls against 20 killers. Hope against experience. Right against might. The abandoned Miller Ranch sat in a valley between 2 ridges, its weathered buildings offering cover while the open approaches would force Tabor's men to charge across killing ground. They had a day to prepare. Jesse organized the defenses with military precision, his years as a scout showing. Clara coordinated supplies and ammunition, her practical mind ensuring nothing was overlooked. Miguel and Ben took charge of positioning shooters. As the sun set, painting the sky blood red, Sarah Oakley approached Clara where she stood watch. How do you do it? The younger woman asked. Face death so calmly. Clara considered the question. I've already lost everything once, my husband, my home, my place in society. Jesse gave me a reason to fight instead of just survive. She looked at Sarah. What's your reason? Sarah was quiet for a moment. Tabor's men killed my cousin in Kansas. Said she was hiding fugitives. Her knuckles whitened on her rifle. She was hiding runaway slaves, doing what was right. Then you understand, Clara said simply. Sometimes the fight comes whether you want it or not. Best to meet it standing. The attack came at dawn, announced by thunder of hooves and war cries designed to terrorize. Cain Tabor led the charge personally, a giant of a man with a face scarred by violence and cruelty. Jesse Colt, he roared. Face me! Boy, face the man who put your father in the ground! The defenders held their fire, waiting for Jesse's signal. Clara could see him struggling with the urge to answer Tabor's challenge immediately. But they'd planned for this, anticipated Tabor's need to make it personal. Not yet, she murmured, though Jesse couldn't hear her from across the compound. Make him come to us. As if hearing her thoughts, Jesse held steady. The attackers swept closer, confident in their numbers. Then, at 60 yards, Jesse's shot rang out. The battle was joined. The preparation paid off. Tabor's men, expecting easy prey, rode into overlapping fields of fire. The first charge broke apart, leaving 5 men dead or dying. But Tabor had numbers and ruthlessness on his side. He regrouped, sending men to flank while others laid down covering fire. East wall, Miguel shouted, firing rapidly. They're trying to... A bullet cut him off, spinning him around. Clara saw him fall, Ben rushing to drag him to cover. The eastern approach was weakening. Sarah Morrison, with me, Clara commanded, leading them to shore up the position. She fired mechanically, picking targets. trying not to think about the lives she was ending. These men had chosen their path when they rode with Tabor. The battle seesawed through the morning. They held the buildings, but ammunition ran low. 2 of their volunteers were dead, 4 more wounded, including Miguel. Tabor's forces had been halved, but 10 men were still too many. Then Clara saw him, Cain Tabor himself, moving through the smoke toward the main house where Jesse commanded the defense. The man who'd started it all, who'd murdered Jesse's father and created the chain of events that led to this moment. Without thought, Clara moved to intercept. She stepped into the open, rifle raised. "Tabor!" The big man turned, surprised. His gun swung toward her. Time slowed. Clara saw Jesse spinning around, saw his face contort in horror as he realized what was happening, saw Tabor's finger tighten on the trigger. 3 shots fired almost simultaneously. Clara's rifle bucked, Tabor's pistol roared, and Jesse's gun spoke with deadly precision. Clara felt the wind of Tabor's bullet pass her cheek. Her own shot took him in the chest, staggering him. Jesse's bullet finished it, dropping Tabor to his knees. "You—" Tabor looked between them, blood frothing his lips. "Both of you." "Together," Clara said quietly. "The way it should be." Tabor fell forward, the light leaving his eyes. With their leader dead, his remaining men broke. Some fled immediately. Others threw down their guns. Hands raised. The battle was over. Jesse reached Clara in 3 strides, pulling her against him. "Don't ever," he said roughly, "ever do that again. Do what saved your life. Risk yours." He pulled back to look at her, fingers checking for injuries. "When I saw him turn that gun on you—" "I know." Clara touched his face. "But he's dead. It's finished. Really finished this time." They stood among the smoke and carnage. 2 people who'd been forged in violence but refused to be defined by it. Around them, survivors tended wounded, secured prisoners. The cost had been high: 3 good people dead, 6 wounded, but they'd stood against evil and won. Miguel would survive, though his shooting days were likely done. Ben had taken a graze, but remained whole. Sarah Oakley had proven herself, earning nods of respect from hardened fighters. As the sun climbed higher, Sheriff Maddox arrived with reinforcements too late for the fight, but in time to handle the aftermath. He looked at Tabor's body, then at Jesse and Clara. "Cain Tabor's been wanted in 5 territories. He said, there'll be reward money, substantial money. Give it to the families." Jesse said immediately, "Those who lost people today, and the settlers Tabor hurt." Maddox nodded slowly. That's a good thing. Colt, right thing." As they prepared to leave the Miller Ranch, Clara found herself looking back at the battlefield. So much death, so much pain, and for what one man's cruelty, another's revenge. Cycles of violence spinning endlessly. "Regrets?" Jesse asked softly. "No," Clara said after a moment. "Just sadness. That it came to this, that it always seems to come to this." "Not always," Jesse reminded her. "We're proof of that. We found something better." She leaned into him. "Yes, we did." They rode back to town in somber procession, wounded and weary, but victorious. This time, Clara knew, it truly was over. No more ghosts from Jesse's past remained to haunt them. No more debts in blood to be paid. That evening, as she and Jesse sat on the porch of their temporary home, Clara thought about the journey that had brought them here. A wounded stranger collapsing at her fence, a widow's desperate choice to show mercy, the violence that followed, but also the love that bloomed despite it all. 3 days, Jesse said quietly. Then California, Clara confirmed. A new life, far from all this. "Do you think—" Jesse hesitated. "Do you think we can really leave it behind, the violence, the killing?" Clara took his hand, feeling the calluses from years of gun work. I think we've earned the right to try. We've paid our dues in lead and blood. Now we get to build something with our hands instead of destroying with them. Jesse brought her hand to his lips. Have I told you today that I love you?
Only a dozen times.
Not nearly enough then. He pulled her close. You saved me. Clara May Colt. In every way a person can be saved.
We saved each other, she corrected.
That's what partners do.
As darkness fell over the Wyoming territory, they sat together in peaceful silence. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The journey to California would be long and uncertain. Building a new life would take work and patience and probably a few more fights along the way. But tonight, they had each other. They had survived the crucible and emerged not unscarred but unbroken. They had taken the darkness of their pasts and transformed it into something bright and worth defending. No more looking back, Clara murmured, echoing their promise. Only forward, Jesse agreed. Together. The stars came out one by one. Same stars that had witnessed their first meeting, their first kiss, their first fight side by side. Now those stars would watch them ride toward a future free from the shadows of yesterday. Clara thought of the woman she'd been lonely, bitter, merely surviving. Jesse had awakened something in her. Yes, but she'd awakened something in him too. Together they'd discovered that even in the harshest landscape, even among violence and death, love could take root and bloom. They were proof that redemption was possible, that second chances were worth fighting for, that sometimes the sweetest fires were the ones that burned away the old to make room for the new. Their story, the part written in gunsmoke and blood, was ending. Their life together, the part written in hope and honest work and quiet mornings without fear, was about to begin. And Clara May Colt, survivor of the Prairie's trials, defender of love against all odds, wouldn't have it any other way. 5 years had passed since Jesse and Clara Colt left Wyoming territory behind. The California sun painted their wheat fields gold, a sight that never failed to make Clara pause in wonder. Their farm sprawled across 40 acres of fertile valley land, bought with honest money and built with their own hands. Jesse stood at the fence line, watching their workers bring in the harvest. His gun hand now wielded tools of creation rather than destruction. The calluses remained, but they came from plows and hammers instead of pistol grips. "Papa, Papa," a small voice called out. Jesse turned to see their daughter, Margaret Ann, named for the little girl from Amarillo, whose death had changed everything, running toward him with her mother's determination and his gray eyes. He scooped her up, swinging her high as she squealed with delight. At 4 years old, little Maggie had never known violence, never seen her parents reach for weapons in the night. That was the gift they'd fought to give her. Clara emerged from the house, her other arm cradling their infant son, Samuel James. She'd insisted on the name, saying it was time to reclaim it from sorrow and give it new meaning. Jesse had understood. Redemption meant honoring the past while building the future. "Letter came," Clara said, producing an envelope from her apron. "From Miguel." Jesse set Maggie down, letting her run off to chase butterflies. He recognized Miguel's careful script, still slightly shaky from the old shoulder wound. They opened it together, standing close in the afternoon light. "My friends," Miguel had written. "The ranch prospers. 20 horses now, with contracts to supply the cavalry. Ben has passed his law examination. Can you imagine? Our young hothead now arguing in courtrooms instead of gunfights. He sends his regards and says to tell Maggie her Uncle Ben will visit at Christmas. There is news from Wyoming. They have erected a monument at the old Miller Ranch, honoring those who stood against Tabor's raiders. Your names are not on it, as you requested, but all know who led that fight. Sheriff Maddox, now Mayor Maddox, sends his respects. Sarah Oakley has married well a doctor from back east, who appreciates a woman who can both host tea and handle a rifle. She asked me to tell you she thinks of you often, with gratitude. The territory grows civilized. There are schools now, and churches, and laws that mostly hold. The old wild days are ending.
my friends. But sometimes, on cold nights, I remember when 3 desperate men found shelter with a brave woman, and I am grateful that our wild days brought us together. Give my love to the children. Tell them their Uncle Miguel has stories waiting of heroes who chose love over violence, building over burning. Perhaps that is the best legacy we can leave, proof that people can change, that the sweetest fires warm homes instead of destroying them. Until we meet again, Miguel Santos. Clara wiped away a tear. He always did have a way with words. Learned from the best, Jessie said, pulling her close. You were always the one who could see poetry in gunpowder. They stood together, watching their children play in the California sunshine. The wheat swayed in the breeze, ready for harvest. From the workers' quarters came the sound of laughter and guitar music. It was a scene of peace that would have seemed impossible in those dark days of running and fighting. Any regrets? Jessie asked. A ritual between them now. Never, Clara answered, as she always did. You, only that it took so long to find you. Little Maggie had discovered a beetle and was studying it with intense concentration. Samuel gurgled happily in his mother's arms. Simple moments, Jessie thought, but worth every bullet fired, every scar earned. That evening, they hosted dinner for their neighbors, the Clemens family from the next farm over. Young Theodore Roosevelt, who was studying the local wildlife, and old Walt Whitman, who'd retired to California and occasionally helped Jessie with the accounts. As Clara served her famous elk stew, a recipe learned in Wyoming and perfected in California, the conversation turned to the news of the day: railroad expansion, Indian conflicts, the changing face of the frontier. It's a new world coming, Whitman observed. The wild times are passing. Good riddance, Mrs. Clemens said firmly. I'll take civilization over gunfights any day. Jessie and Clara exchanged glances. They'd never told their California neighbors the full truth of their past, letting them assume they were simply another couple who'd come west for opportunity. Later, after the guests had gone and the children were asleep, Jessie and Clara sat on their porch, much as they had that last night in Wyoming. But now, instead of planning escape, they planned tomorrow's work: which fields to plow, what seeds to plant, whether to buy those 2 new mares at auction. Do you miss it? Clara asked suddenly. The excitement, the danger. Jessie considered. I miss the simplicity sometimes, when violence was the question and a fast draw was the answer. But that was a young man's thinking. He looked at his hands. These hands have taken lives. Clara, more than I like to count, but now they grow food, build homes, hold our children. That's a better legacy. The past still visits sometimes, Clara said softly. In dreams. Mine too. Jessie took her hand. But then I wake up next to you, hear the children breathing safe in their beds, and I know we made the right choice. A coyote howled in the distance, that wild sound that connected all frontiers. Once, it would have meant danger. Now it was just part of the night's music. Tell me our story, Clara said, settling against his shoulder. Another ritual between them. Jessie smiled. Once upon a time, there was a lonely widow on the Wyoming prairie, strong as iron, twice as stubborn, trying to survive in a world that had taken everything from her. And one stormy night, Clara continued, a wounded stranger collapsed at her fence, a man running from shadows, carrying guilt like chains. She took him in, Jessie said, though every sensible thought said not to, nursed him back to health with gentle hands and fierce determination. And he stayed to help with chores, Clara added, though he should have run, fixed fences and gentled horses and slowly mended more than wood and wire. They found love where it shouldn't have bloomed, in soil poisoned by violence and watered with blood. But somehow, it grew anyway, strong and true. There were trials, Clara murmured. Men who came hunting, demons from the past, choices between safety and righteousness. But they faced them together, back to back, heart to heart. And when the smoke cleared, they were still standing.
Still burning,
Clara corrected.
with that sweet fire that lights from within.
They fell quiet, remembering the old farmhouse. Now ashes, the friends made and lost, the blood spilled and lives taken. It was a past that could never be erased, only transformed.
Mama, Papa.
They turned to find Maggie in her nightgown, rubbing sleepy eyes.
Bad dreams, sweetheart?
Clara asked, opening her arms. The little girl climbed into her mother's lap.
I dreamed about wolves.
No wolves here, Jessie assured her.
Just coyotes, and they stay far away.
Were there wolves where you used to live? Jessie and Clara shared another look. Someday, when the children were older, they'd tell the whole truth about the two-legged wolves they'd faced, about courage and redemption and the prices paid for both. But not tonight.
There were,
Clara said carefully.
but we left that place and came here, where it's safe.
Why?
Because,
Jessie said, lifting his daughter into his own arms.
we wanted to build something beautiful.
Like this farm and this family. Sometimes you have to leave the dark places behind to find the light. Maggie considered this with 4-year-old seriousness. I'm glad you found the light.
So are we,
Little one, Clara said.
so are we.
They tucked her back into bed. Jessie telling her a story about brave princesses and reformed dragons until she drifted off. In the hallway, they paused, looking in at their sleeping children.
We did it,
Clara whispered.
we really did it. Built something good from all that violence.
We did, Jessie agreed.
Though I sometimes wonder if they'll understand.
When they're older, the choices we made, the things we did, they'll understand that we chose love over hate, building over destroying, that when the world tried to make us into weapons, we became shelters instead. Clara smiled.
That's a legacy worth leaving.
As they prepared for bed, Jessie caught sight of himself in the mirror. The years had added lines to his face, gray to his temples. He looked like what he was: a farmer, a father, a man at peace. The dangerous gunslinger was still there, buried deep, but no longer in control. Clara appeared behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist.
Handsome as ever,
Mr. Colt. Flatterer, though you're more beautiful now than the day we met. Now, who's flattering? But she smiled, seeing herself as he did, not the bitter widow who'd taken in a stranger, but a woman who'd found her strength and used it to build rather than break. Outside, the California night sang its peaceful song. Inside, a family that shouldn't exist slept safe and sound, proof that even the darkest stories can find bright endings.
alone on the prairie.
Jessie murmured, remembering.
But you burned like fire inside.
Not alone anymore. Clara reminded him. Never alone again. They held each other in the darkness, two souls who'd found salvation in each other's arms. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, crops to tend, children to raise, a future to build. But tonight, they had this peace, love, and the knowledge that they'd earned their happiness through courage, sacrifice, and the willingness to believe that people could change. Their wild days were behind them, but the fire remained transformed from something that destroyed into something that warmed, that welcomed, that lit the way home. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all, not the battles won or enemies defeated, but the simple, profound triumph of choosing love over violence, hope over despair, and discovering that even on the loneliest prairie, two hearts together could create their own light. The stars watched over the Colt farm, same stars that had witnessed their bloody beginning. But now those ancient lights shone down on something far rarer than violence, a happy ending carved from sorrow, a family born from ashes, and a love that had transformed two broken people into something whole and wonderful. And in her dreams that night, Clara stood again at her window in Wyoming, watching a stranger collapse at her fence. But this time, she smiled, knowing how the story would end. "Welcome home," she whispered to the wind. "Welcome home." Thank you, dear listeners, for joining me on this journey through the Wild West, where love bloomed amid gun smoke and redemption was bought with courage. I hope Clara and Jesse's story touched your heart as it did mine. I'd love to know where you're listening from, whether it's a bustling city or quiet countryside. Leave a comment below, and let's share this moment of connection across the miles. If this tale of fierce love and second chances moved you, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories that explore the human heart against the backdrop of frontier justice. Hit that like button, and if you feel this story deserves to reach more souls searching for hope, press the hype button to help spread Clara and Jesse's legacy of love conquering all. Until we meet again under starlit skies, remember, even in the darkest prairie nights, love can kindle the sweetest fire. Happy trails, partners.